Hello and welcome to Investing Confidential. Today we're going to talk about the energy markets a little bit, and we're going to talk about mainly about the EV scam that has really been incredible over the last few years. Why they're doing it, what's the reasoning behind it, and is it going to work? And what's the result going to be? So let's jump right into the oil situation, energy. Here's a 1 year chart of crude. Basically, this is the basic problem with the Fed, the current administration, Wall Street. They can't knock oil down, folks. They need oil to go down. They need oil to go down because of their ambitions about inflation, about taking rates down. Remember, we've been discussing this. It's all about the S&P 500. This oil chart is really the key to keeping the for them to keeping the S&P 500 up, because without the S&P 500 going up, everything in the world, all their plans will implode. Okay, and I've been saying that, and it's a crazy. It's the S&P 500 is no longer a leading indicator. It's a manipulated index. It's everything for the current administration, for Wall Street, and for the rest of the world. Okay, so crude here. Okay, we everyone's talking lower rates. When's the Fed going to lower rates? Well, as we said, the Fed's probably going to do lower rates. Again, this is all part of the election strategy. You got to lower rates once. You got to try to boost the economy, but it will be a policy error because crude is not cooperating. Okay, crude again here has been in a pretty steady over a long period of time around these levels. It's not going down. Most likely, it's going to break higher for a lot of different reasons, mainly because increased usage. There hasn't been much, outside of one big discovery in Guyana. There hasn't been much, exploration. Every oil well is finite. Okay, no oil well lasts forever. Now, is there a lot of crude? Absolutely. Is it harder to get, more expensive? Absolutely. So, crude oil is only going to go higher in the, let's say, over the medium term, maybe even long term. I don't know, but the bottom line is that this chart is not going to allow the Fed to do deep cuts. They want to, because they need to get the S&P up. They need to get the current administration elected again. But this chart, crude oil is not cooperating with them. Okay, and again, energy is a big part of their strategy. Now, talk about. I don't like to use the word misinformation or anything of this, but man, when you see articles like this in the Financial Times, I mean, it's just ridiculous. World facing staggering oil glut by the end of the decade. I mean, do these people think we're morons? Okay. I don't believe any of this data. I don't. Because again, oil wells are finite. Okay. They don't, when someone taps into an oil well, okay, over time, it degrades. That's fact. It's fact for the last 100 years. And now they're saying people are producing more. How are they producing more? Nobody is going out looking for oil, any great shakes. They can't. Okay, they're now, they have all of this ESG stuff going on. All the oil companies, they're constantly going out. What are they with their excess cash? What are they doing? They're investing in renewables. They're making no return on those renewables, but they have to have no choice. And so it's hard to believe articles like this, that these organizations come out with these incredible views. I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. And then in the short term, you've got this to deal with. The current administration, okay, depleted the strategic oil reserve, so the lowest possibly ever reserves in history, and now they're buying it back. So they've got to buy a lot of oil, and the prices aren't down. They're breaking up. So again, this whole mishandling of the energy policy in this country is coming back to haunt the administration and will limit the Fed's ability to cut rates, even though they're desperate to cut rates. And there's no reason to cut rates, but they want to. They want to get the S&P up, so they have to cut rates. But crude is not going to help them. Crude will not help them. Okay, so let's talk about EVs. So, I mean, as everyone knows, it began with Tesla, all right, many years ago. And Tesla was a niche company, right? High-end automobiles, fantastic. If you never drove a Tesla, you should. They're really fun to drive. But it was for the rich, okay? You had to have a lot of money. $100,000 car, now they're $80,000, $60,000 car. Not for, John Q. Public around the world. And then you got the climate people came in and said, hey, this is going to solve all our climate problems. We need to change everything to EV. So EVs became a religion, just like climate became a religion. And everyone started pumping up, let's convert all gasoline cars to EVs. And this wasn't just a US thing, it's happening all over. But in the US, obviously being the most vocal. So the Biden administration started putting in these mandates. Certain states like California put in these mandates. These things will never happen because, again, I'll go into it. But EVs are uneconomic. They're uneconomical because, again, the dumb government, instead of creating an infrastructure for EVs, they just demanded EVs with no infrastructure. Absolutely none. It would be easy to put EV infrastructure in by essentially mandating every hotel in the country based on number of rooms to have a number of EV charging stations. That would eliminate the issue, but that's too easy. That's my solution. Very easy to do, but they haven't done it yet. So there's not enough charging. The battery's life is horrible on these cars. Absolutely horrible. They're niche cars. They're not your second car. They're your third or fourth or fifth car. They're not your primary car. They cannot be. Maybe in certain states, but they cannot be your primary car. They're unreliable from a standpoint of battery life. But no one cares. They don't care in London. They made all the black taxi cars EVs. Okay. And from what I understand, I spoke to someone in London cab company. The average cab can go 70 miles before it has to have a charge. These are the electric black cabs in London. Think about a taxi, 70 miles, and you got to get a charge. All the taxis now are being converted to dual hybrid because a standalone EV is not practical. So everything is, but these maniacs continue to force feed the world, and in the US primarily, with this whole notion of EVs, when at the end of the day, it's just not practical. So let's look at let's look at why it's not practical. I think I told you why it's not practical, but let's look at the alternative because there is an alternative. And one of the dangers, by the way, okay, let's use Tesla as an example, because Tesla has been around longer than anybody else in the EV world, okay, in terms of mainstream. And here's the problem with a Tesla. You can't own it. Everyone I know that drives an EV, they lease it. But if you own an EV, over time, these things are going to plummet in price. You think a regular used car plummets in price? Forget about it. Because once that battery goes, and batteries degenerate over time, that's a scientific fact. Once these batteries really go, they go fast. And then what do? Spend because replacing the battery is about $30,000. You do like a lot of guys do on YouTube, and they burn the cars because it's just not worth it. So as you see here, the used prices for these vehicles just uneconomical. Okay, it just doesn't make any sense. And the people are speaking about it. The people have spoken. Okay, look at the EV market. As in terms of market share. So today, with all of the preaching, it's only about 8% of the market. But look at Bank of America, which claim that EVs are going to gain all the share against hybrids. And I'm going to touch on hybrids now because hybrids are the solution. But again, this is disinformation. Bank of America. I mean, it's just shocking that, these companies like Bank of America just constantly put out information that is just false. Okay, absolutely false. So they're telling you that EVs are going to gain. I say it's going to be the complete opposite. But the problem today is not necessarily the cost of EVs. Okay, because the phenomenon today is that our friends in China who saw what was going on in the US, and China, by the way, we have about 20 car companies. They have about 200 car companies. Okay. They decided that they're going to go all in on EVs as well. Actually, they kind of have to because of their country being so polluted. And so, the Chinese ramped up production of EVs massively to the point where no one was buying them. There's no demand in China for EVs. So the EVs lay on the side of the streets. They have giant parking lots, growing weeds full of EVs. And finally, the government, taking advantage of the weak economy and really weak currency, said, "Hey, let's just dump these things." And that's what they're doing. Okay, so you can see here now that their plan all along, China, was to take all these EVs and dump them all over the world. And they started in places like Africa, Chile, parts of Europe that were obsessed with EVs, selling really cheap EVs, $5,000, $9,000 EV. These are, by the way, cars that I wouldn't drive. They're just horrible, horrible cars. But they dumped them. And, as you can see here, it continues. Okay, over the last here's where they're going. Okay, Middle East, increasing to Brazil, Europe. What you don't see here is the US yet, but it's coming. And these are all very, very low priced, very, very cheap EVs. So what has happened is, the governments are waking up. First it was Europe. Now they're gonna tax all these electric cars because they know they're being dumped. This is a dumping tax. Absolute dumping tax. And the US is going to follow suit. Okay, putting a tariff on EV vehicles coming in. So that's not going to stop because what are the Chinese doing? They're setting up manufacturing facilities in Mexico, taking advantage of the free trade agreement and dumping EV cars into us. If you one of these days you're going to go to a dealership and they're going to say, "Hey, don't buy a $40,000 EV from Ford. Here's a $10,000 EV. Run. These are terribly made cars. The batteries are going to degenerate faster than you can blink. They'll probably have environmental issues. I wouldn't touch these cars with a 10-foot pole because the future is battery, but it's in hybrids. Okay. So whether you go to Toyota, whether you go to Hyundai, because they're ahead of the curve when it comes to hybrids, or BYD. Okay, here's the big innovation. So BYD is a Chinese company. This is the one that's owned by Warren Buffett. Because hybrids are the future. Because you can I think everybody who has a gas vehicle today, if you told them, hey, you're going to get 50 miles to the gallon with a hybrid, save on gas, you can drive your car for 700-800 miles without, everyone would do it. But no, they're pushing the EV mania. So bottom line is the future of automobiles are hybrids for sure. Eventually there'll be EVs, but we don't have the infrastructure, but it's hybrid for sure. The Chinese, Japanese are way ahead of us. They're ahead of us because our government has mandated the Fords, General Motors, etc., to go EV. That's been a disaster. They're by the way, they're abandoning that. So they're behind the curve now because of government intervention. And look, many of these many of these hybrids are being built here in the US or in Mexico, which, by the way, we do benefit, believe it or not, from that. So the EV thing has peaked. It's dying down. EVs are not going away. Tesla's not going away. But the mass production of EVs in the short term is not going to happen. The future is hybrids. Gas prices will continue to go up. Inflation will not come down to where the Fed wants it to, 2%. That ain't happening. They will cut rates once, but that will be a policy mistake. And unfortunately, the energy policy in this country is not going to really change very much, no matter who gets elected. So if you're a driver looking for a new car, think about hybrids. If you're an investor, be careful out there.